Good morning to all. So, as part of our syllabus, in previous class we have discussed about weapons of mass destruction, and today we are going to discuss about important policy about our Indian foreign policy, and also we will discuss and conclude the last chapter with India's relations with major powers, United States of America, Russia, and China, and also India's relations with its neighbors, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. So, every nation after getting independence, it has its own foreign policy. Like that, in recent years, many issues and many conflicts, also deciding the foreign policies of several states. So, if we see our Indian foreign policy also visualize widening the domain of influence and enhancing its function across countries and also making its existence seems like budding supremacy. So here our Indian foreign policy is responsible for shaping distinct portions of the country. If we see comprising economy, topography, history, and even culture and ethno, and many factors are determining our foreign policy. So, if you see, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, facilitated the modeling of the foreign policy of India. So, in this topic, we are going to discuss about some important factors related to the Indian foreign policy. So, if we see, almost since India gained independence in 1947, the world has changed beyond recognition. So, if you see, after the Second World War, we are unable to send the previous paper. I will give my number and last minute. So, you just text me. I will send you the previous papers of our subject. Okay. So every nation after getting independence, if we see in international relations, most of the nations created its foreign policy after getting independence from their colonial rulers. So if you see after Second World War, most of the nations, almost two-thirds countries in the globe got independence from their colonial states. So after Second World War, the world has changed beyond recognition. So from the bipolar world of the United States and Soviet Union to a brief unipolar world period when American hegemony reigned and to one where China and United States are moving toward another bipolar competition distracted by multipolar illusions. So if we see India faces the challenge of defining its unique foreign policy identity and shaping the contours of its engagement of balance and the national interest and the moral values. So every state in the modern state system uh, every state in the modern system is having consisting some basic elements which we have discussed in first year only about state definition and its elements. One is population, territory, government, and sovereignty. So while a nation is a community based on shared ethnicity, history, traditions, and aspirations, so the territory is also an essential part of a state. So because it is the physical substance of the state. But for a nation, the territory is not an essential part of the nation. A nation can survive without a fixed territory. So in some countries such as America, Australia, Canada, the state comprises many nations and they are multinational societies. If we see America consisting of 50 plus 1 states, so almost 51 states. Like India also there is 51 states, we are having here 28, but here we are uniting as a single nation, but there are in United States is different. So if they want to uh, uh, go from the that United States, they're having choice. But here in India, no one state has that choice to withdraw from this territory. So if you see, like many other nations, Indian foreign policy also is a comprehensive set of or group of political aspirations defining how the country will network and deal with other nations worldwide. So, implementing this foreign policy includes expanding political, social, cultural, trade, defense, and other relations with other countries and participating in a multinational, uh, multi-tangential discussions encompassing many countries. So, while executing the Indian foreign policy, the country aspired to preserve a few specific objectives, including world peace and independence of Asian and African countries. So the opportunities and the associates in the international system have put Indian foreign policy in check. So moreover, in the past few decades, India has taken up an additional affluent Indian foreign policy that comprises SARC embodied neighborhood first approach and the Look East strategy to develop a more widespread economic and tactical cooperation with other East Asian nations. So, India respected the sovereignty of all other nations to attain security by upholding harmony and reconciliation in its conduct of foreign associations. So, here India's national and international dynamics such as scarcity of resources and financial dependency on other economically powerful countries have significantly affected India's foreign policy. So, so uh, if you see, India is one of the most ancient civilizations in the world and from ancient times. So that's what the impact of our ancient rulers and ancient policies impacted our foreign policy. Indian foreign policy remained independent, whether it was the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta Empire, or the Mughal Empire. So the British were the determinants of India's foreign policy during the colonial period. So, who used India for their benefit? But after independence, Indian foreign policy is again fulfilling India's interest. So, today, India is selected countries of the world in military field, space, religious culture, etc. And India has used them better in its foreign policy formulation. So many factors are determining the foreign policy of a country in which geopolitical, military force, etc. are important. If we see the major and important determinants of India's foreign policy, one is geographical factors because every nation has its geographical boundaries. So geographical factors are important in determining foreign policy of a state, which is called geopolitics. So India occupies a central position in Asia and occupies even the largest nation in the South Asia. So, so in such a situation, any big incident in the whole of Asia affects India. So the Himalayas are the sentinels of India, which play an important role in determining relations with other Himalayan countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar. But the desire of China to maintain its dominance in the region continuously since 1962 has a clear impact on India's foreign policy, which has recently shown a change in relations with Nepal. So, along with this, India has a natural edge in the Indian Ocean, and India's dominance over the Indian Ocean is necessary to become an important power of the Indian Pacific region. So at present, the Indian Ocean region is an important route of trade and communication of the whole world. So it also plays an important role in determining the foreign policy of India. And also, population is one of the important factor for determining foreign policy. So India is currently the first and most populous and youngest country in the world. So India is becoming a consumption-oriented country. In such a situation, it will fulfill the need of a big market for all producing nations. So, which is the determinant of foreign policy. But such a large population, problems like hunger, poverty, and unemployment are evident on Indian foreign policy. So many times there has been a dispute in the world, union between India and America about the government's intervention in agriculture subsidies. So government system also impacting our foreign policy. India has a democratic governance system that inspires many countries of the world to accept Indian ideology. For example, Asian countries plagued by China look towards India because India's democracy follows the principle of peaceful coexistence. So, but many times in the parliamentary system, the role of state governments are also important in determining foreign policy. It becomes more important, and if there is a coalition government at the center, as was shown in the Tamil issue in Sri Lanka and the 2005 US nuclear deal. So, economic development also important. So economic sovereignty of its utmost importance in determining foreign policy. Like its policy, India had to open its markets in the 1991, but after that India has become very strong financially. India's economic growth has attracted many countries. So today India is an important energy consumer, with countries like Iran, Russia having economic alliances with India, even Turkmenistan also. But still, the negative trade balance with China remains India's main problem. So, culture also determining our foreign policy. History and culture can be seen and important in the formulation of Indian foreign policy. So, if you see the Kautilya's theory of powerful kingdom with the ideals of Buddha, and Gandhi shows the path of India. So India's civil or civilian religious relationship is well established from many cultures, many countries of the world, and also there are Hindu, Islam, Christian, Buddhist majorities in the country. The basis of India-Israel relations is somewhere in the policy of all religions in India. Principles like imperialism, colonialism, opposition to armaments have been derived from the history of India, which are seen in Indian foreign policy today. So, regional environment also important here. So, regional events are also important in determining foreign policy. So, for example, in 1971, the alliance of China, US, and Pakistan brought a crisis situation for India. Then India got inclined towards Russia. So at present, the increasing dominance of China is also a reason for intensification of India-US relations. So India has increased the capacity and the power with lookist to activist policies and China's rise in Asian group. So military power also important. So today, if you see in world today, India is the most powerful third country in the army. 4th in the Air Force, and 6th in the Navy. So at the same time, India is rich in nuclear power. Everyone knows India dominance in space. In such a situation, they play an important role in the foreign policy making of India. So these elements are present in India's foreign policy of India. So, but these elements change constantly. In modern times, it is necessary to determine policies keeping the national interest and mind. So 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 if you see the moral aspects of India's foreign policy, that are several issues are there. Uh, One is Panchashil formula. So Panchashil means five virtues. They are formally agreement on trade between the Tibet region of China and India, signed on April 29th of 1954, and later evolved to act as the basis of conduct of international relations globally. So these five principles are: one is mutual respect for each other country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Second one is mutual non-aggression. Third one is mutual non-interference. Fourth one is equality and mutual benefit. And the last one is peaceful coexistence. So, uh, so this is the Panchashil formula. So, and also proactive and impartial assistance. India does not hesitate in promoting democracy wherever potential exists. So, this is done by proactively providing assistance in capacity building and strengthening the institutions of democracy. So, global problem solving approach is also important here. India advocates a global debate and global consensus on issues of global dimensions such as world trade, regime, climate change, terrorism, intellectual property rights, global governance, health hazards. So, under the even recent times, under the vaccine diplomacy initiative, India exported 60 million doses of on commercial terms and 10 million as grants. So, so these are the important factors here, and also the main features of India's foreign policy is: one is important characteristic is non-alignment. As we said, Jawaharlal Nehru introduced this policy. So when we say our policy is one of the most important policy, most of the nations, including around two-thirds members of the United Nations, are approaching and implementing this non-alignment formula. So uh, so non-alignment means neutrality. So before the disintegration of USSR, there are only two power blocks and the world divided into two parties. So the policy of non-alignment is to not to join in any group in USA or USSR group. So the maintenance of neutrality is the policy of this non-alignment movement. So in the initial stages, the policy of non-alignment proved immensely beneficial to the country, and also it was able to secure a high and respected place in international forums. So, and peaceful coexistence is also important feature of Indian foreign policy. So, Nehru explained the relationship of the Panchashil to India's foreign policy is example for this formula of peaceful coexistence. And also India has always been the champion of the freedom of colonial peoples and raised its voice against any form of colonialism and imperialism. So India is against to the colonialism and imperialism. So India is a anti-colonial state and anti-imperial state. So since India herself has suffered from the imperialistic regime of the British for about 2 centuries, so and also India opposes the racial discrimination. So India has vigorously opposed the racial discrimination in South Africa, elsewhere. So just a second. So this is the important determinants and features of India's foreign policy. And also, if we see the way forward of this policy, uh, environmental problems are intervened with social processes in recent times. So there is a need of achieving sustainability and economic as well as ecological level as highlighted in sustainable development goals. So balancing internal and external development is important. So India should look forward to creating an external environment which is conducive for an inclusive development of India. So, and also in recent times, India's voice is heard on global forums, and that India is able to influence world opinion on issues of global dimensions such as terrorism, climate change, disarmament, and reforms for institutions of global governance. So policy evolution along with maintaining basic principles. So we are living in a dynamic world. India's foreign policy is therefore geared up to be proactive, flexible, as well as pragmatic. So as to make quick adjustments to respond to evolving situations. So shaping the global agenda also important here. So it is important for India's foreign policy to trace the role of a leading power in the international system, one that shapes global norms and institutional architecture rather than this being shaped by others. So to this is linked the aspiration to be permanent member in the of the expanded UN Security Council, for which a large number of countries have already pledged support. So this is also important for India. So and to succeed, our ongoing programs like Make in India, Skill India, Smart Cities, Infrastructure Development, Digital India, Clean India, etc. Need for foreign partners, foreign direct investments, financial assistance, and transfer of technology. So Indian foreign policy should add focus on this aspect of diplomacy for development by integrating economic diplomacy with political diplomacy. So this is about India's foreign policy. So we have a syllabus about India's relationship with major powers such as United States of America, Russia, and China. So the relationship between India and USA have been far from uniform. They are very from cordial to hostile from time to time. So even both countries are ruled by the same colonial power, that is British. So they got independence in 1776. We got independence in 1947. So that is the difference. But both are we under the rule of British imperialism. So if we are look at the at least of diplomats, officials, ministers from across the globe rushing to New Delhi in recent times, India's role as an emerging global superpower is quite easy to infer. So these two countries are not sharing consensus of over the uh, Russia-Ukraine conflict, but the relationship between India and US started long ago. So so, however, there are many changes and many issues on which India and USA held divergent views. So, on certain major issues, India seconded USA, but on several others, India came into conflict with US in the international arena. So, if you see the relationship between India and USA, uh, so we have started from the initial time. So India-US bilateral relations have been developed into a global strategic partnership. So based on shared democratic values and increasing convergence of interests on bilateral, regional, and global issues. So there is regular exchange of high-level political visits have provided sustained momentum of bilateral cooperation. And today, the India and US relationship or cooperation is broad-based and multi-sectoral, covering trade and investment and defense and security, education, science and technology, cyber security, high technology, civil nuclear energy, space technology and applications, and clean energy, environment, agriculture and health. So also vibrant people to people interaction and support across the political spectrum in both countries nurture our bilateral relationship as well. So if you see the areas and instruments of cooperation between USA and India, so political cooperation is important here. High level visits are there. So mutual visits at the leadership level, prime minister, president level, have been an integral element of the engagement between India and USA. So the outcomes generated of these visits have been instrumental in further strengthening and developing the multifaceted ties between the two countries. So also both leaders consulted the India, US, Japan trilateral summits, India, US, Australia, Japan quadrilateral and G20 summits. So high level dialogue mechanisms are there. India, US 2+2 ministerial dialogue, India, US commercial dialogue, India, US economic and financial partnership, India, US Trade Policy Forum, India-US Strategic Energy Partnership, so India-US Homeland Security Dialogue. So these are high-level dialogues. So defense also important here. Defense relationship has emerged as a major pillar of India and USA partnership in strategic terms, with intensification in defense trade and joint exercises and personal exchanges and cooperation in maritime security and counter piracy. So India conducts more bilateral exercises with the United States than with any other country. So almost aggregate worth of defense related acquisitions from the United States is worth more than 15 billion US dollars. So the India US Defense Technology and Trade Initiative is aimed at promoting co-development and co-production efforts. So these two countries now have 4 agreements that cover areas of military information, logistics exchange, compatibility and security between them. So and also both countries with the cooperation, they are initiated counterterrorism and internal security challenges. So the bilateral joint working group and counterterrorism is an important mechanism in this regard. So both sides have also initiated a designations dialogue to discuss designations of terrorists and entities. So apart from these, both sides also cooperate with each other on counterterrorism and security issues in various multilateral bodies. So in recently 2021, both countries held consultations on counterterrorism. So under the India-US Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership, where both sides pledged to further expand cooperation on law enforcement, information sharing, exchanging best practices, and increasing strategic convergence. So, and also there is trade and economic relations are there with India and US. US was India's largest export destination and second largest trading partner in 2021. So the top traded goods include pearls and precious stones, pharmaceuticals, machinery, electronics, clothing, vehicles, chemicals and fish products, optical, photo, medical apparatus, and aluminium. So there are several dialogue mechanisms are strengthen bilateral agreement on economic and trade issues. So further, India and US have set up a bilateral investment initiative in 2014 with a special focus on facilitating foreign direct investments for portfolio investment, capital market development, and financing of infrastructure. So in energy and climate change also important here between relations with US and India. The US has emerged as key partner for India in the field of energy. So the bilateral strategic energy partnership launched in 2018 between two countries is robust and witnessing increasing diversification across the both conventional and renewable energy sources. So and also science and technology sharing also important here. So multifaceted cooperation between India and USA in the field of science and technology have been growing steadily. It is also important for the both relations, and both countries also have a long history of cooperation in civil space arena that includes cooperation in earth observation, satellite navigation, and space science and exploration. So even ISRO and NASA are also working towards intensifying cooperation in Mars exploration, heliophysics, and human spaceflight through relevant working groups between both sides. So education also important here. India and US have very strong linkages and collaboration in the field of higher education. So uh, So USA is one of the most favored destinations by Indian students for higher education. More than 2 lakh Indian students are currently pursuing various courses in United States of America. So there are challenges also there. Some high trade barriers also there. The US is especially miffed at India's action in early 2018 when in the annual budget the government had hiked import duties and adopted price caps on a range of imports such as medical devices and ethanol. So the US government also complained about this issue about India's complex customs clearance procedures. So visa issues also there. So the Indian government has strongly objected to this issue, arguing that the restrictions on work visas would inhibit Indian workers to move to the United States of America. So, so being the world's leading democracies and market economies, India and US each other as vital strategic and natural allies, and more so given the rise of China and given the changing geopolitical strategic space in the Indo-Pacific region. So, as India and US grow closer, engaging in economical parameters, democracy projects demand high cooperation and collaboration on the global front. So both nations should come on a common platform to address rising socio-economic and geopolitical issues, sharing a unified vision. So, so our next topic is Indo-Russia relations. So the India and the Russia ties have been a long-standing relation. So there is a large history here since the signing of the uh, declaration of on the India-Russia. Just ignore the background sounds. So during the Cold War, India and the Soviet Union had a strong strategic, military, economic, and diplomatic relationship. So after the dissolution of the or disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia inherited its close relationship with India, which resulted in both nations sharing special strategic relation. So, however, the relations have taken a steep downfall over the past few years, especially in the post-COVID scenario. So, so we have nuclear relations with Russia. Russia is an important partner for India in the area of peaceful use of nuclear energy. So it recognizes India as a country with advanced nuclear technology with an impeccable non-proliferation record. So and also both India and Russia are implementing Roper nuclear power project in Bangladesh, and also both side cooperates in the peaceful uses of outer space, including satellite launches, navigation system, remote sensing, and other societal applications of space. So, in MOU also there memorandum of understanding ISRO and Roscosmos on joint activities in the field of human specified program. So, and also the relationship has increased in the sharing of science and technology. So, the working group of science and technology functioning under this area, the integrated long-term program and basic science cooperation program are the three main institutional mechanisms for bilateral space science and technology cooperation. So while the science academies of the two countries promote inter-academy exchanges also. So this is also one of the important factor to strengthen uh, India-Russia relations. So if you see the political relations with India and Russia, uh, India and Russia have reaffirmed the need of reform the UN Security Council is better to reflect the current world order and make it more effective in dealing with emerging global challenges. So, at high level meetings also encouraging both relations. The annual summit meeting between Prime Minister of India and President of Russian Federation is the highest institutionalized dialogue mechanism in the strategic partnership between India and Russia. So the prime ministers of both nations meet along the sidelines of BRICS summit and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO and G20. So both leaders meet along the informal summit as well. So there is defense and security cooperation also there. India has a long-standing and wide-ranging cooperation with Russia in the field of defense. So India-Russia military technical cooperation has evolved from a buyer-seller framework to one evolving joint research. So furthering this cooperation. An agreement on the cooperation in the production of space parts for Russian or Soviet military equipment was signed during 20th annual bilateral summit in Russia 2019. So both sides carry out joint tri-services exercise Indra to strengthen field marine fight skills as well as improve cooperation between India and Russia and India's armed forces. So in recently, India and Russia have also signed a program of cooperation in the field of defense for the next 10 years from 2021 to 31. So trade and economic relations are also important here. Intensifying the trade and economic relations have been identified as a priority area by the leaders of both sides. So, if you see, India export amounted 2.6 billion US dollars, while imports from Russia amounted 5.48 billion US dollars. So, the primary institution at the government level is the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission for Trade, Economic, Scientific and Cultural Cooperation. So both the governments have undertaken initiatives to promote bilateral investments, primarily through facilitating high-level government to business and business contracts, apart from the ongoing investment process in strategic sectors in the both the countries. So uh, and also we have science and technology cooperation, space cooperation, and cultural cooperation also there. And there are several challenges also there. If you see uh, the lack of involvement of private sector, absence of logistics, poor connectivity, and more recently, the stalling of the international north-south economic corridor have resulted in higher costs. So there has been a gradual decline in the orders of India and Russia because of India's desire of diversify its defense imports and therefore a highlighted competition for Russia with other suppliers. So moreover, India also had concerns in the past regarding supply and servicing of defense supplies. So So India and Russia continue to share a common strategic rationale for their relationship apart from bilateral synergy. So the two are members of various multilateral organizations, including BRICS, BRIC, G20, East Asia Summit, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where avenues for cooperation on issues of mutual importance exist. So the fact that Russia holds a permanent seat at the UN Security Council and has been a supporter of India on various issues, including Kashmir at the International Forum, is of critical importance for India. So, India would do well to take steps to shore up its relations with Russia to prevent it from becoming more dependent than it is already on China. So, at the same time, Russia would also benefit from diversifying its relations across the region, including India, so as to prevent its pivot to Asia becoming the pivot to China. So, so thus India and Russia's relations cannot flourish on defense and historical linkages alone. So, with systematic changes underway in international relations, new dimensions of cooperation need to be found to build a strong economic and strategic partnership. So, on the whole, both the India and Russia will have to learn to navigate their relationship amidst challenges emerging not just from bilateral factors but also regional and global ones. So, as both countries seek to strengthen their position at the time of flux in the international order. So, this is the relationship between India and Russia. So, we have India and China relations also there. So, so today's achievements of India and China relations embodied the great efforts of several generations. So both nations need to master the four keys of leading, transmitting, shaping, and integrity. So it is particularly important to revisit the original aspiration of establishing diplomatic relations uh, 70 years ago and carry forward to the spirit of good neighborness and friendship, unity, and cooperation. So, so on 1st April of 1950, India became the first non-socialist black country to establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. So Prime Minister Nehru visited China in October 1954, while the India China border conflict in 1962 was serious setback to ties. So India China relations, though occasionally showing signs of peace and cooperation, have often been affected by tension and mistrust. So, with the potential to make big contributions to regional peace and development, these two Asian powers have, by design or accident, themselves been the sources of regional tension and insecurity to some extent. So, besides these internal dynamics, the interplay of interests and the moves of their neighbors and several external powers would have significant bearing on the equation and relations between them. So there are some conflicts also there. The biggest problem of the Tibet and Dalai Lama. So this led to the first ever war between these two nations. China is very uh, sensitive about the territorial sovereignty, and having Dalai Lama run a shadow government in India has historically been a major irritator for them. So India's support for the Dharmashala regime is a huge issue for China, not even headline worthy for India. And also, two border disputes are there. One is in a region called Aksai Chin, and another in a region called Arunachal Pradesh. Both nations claim both regions, although China controls the former and India the better. So, when in recently, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited China in 2015, one of his objectives was persuade the Chinese leadership to restart discussions on the clarification of the line of actual control through the exchange of maps. So, and also China has been accused of pursuing strategic maneuvers on well thought out route encircling India in the Indian Ocean. So there are several diplomat visits also there, courtesy calls, exchange of gifts and promises between Mr. Modi and the head of the all of the surrounding countries. And water issue also there. The dispute between India and China is mainly regarding the Brahmaputra river flowing through the two countries. So the search of water resources in China and India has persistently been a source of tension between the two countries. So even Chinese efforts to divert the water resources of the Brahmaputra river away from India's will worsen a situation that has been remained tension since the 1962 Indo-China war. So, and also the Pakistan factor also important here. The long-time friendship between China and Pakistan rooted in a time when both countries were deeply mistrustful of India, so has long made New Delhi nervous. So the relationship has mainly gone one way, with China providing economic assistance and political backing to the Pakistan. And Islamabad is also anxious for alliance it can use to balance the growing economic and political clout of India. So, South China Sea issue also there with India. China opposes India's oil exploration in the South China Sea. So, it has been continuously expressing its reservation in this regard in the last few years. And uh, China further explains the Sino-Park understanding to implement CPEC through POK is based on a range bilateral agreements, and also uh, uh, some areas of cooperation also there. Despite their rivalries, the two countries has played up their cultural links such as the importation of Buddhism into China by wandering Chinese monks more than 1500 years ago and have found ample room for economic cooperation. Both are the members of the BRICS grouping of emerging economies, which is now establishing a formal lending arm, the New Development Bank. India also was founding member of China-backed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and also which plans to be formally established by year's end and seeks to emulate institutes such as World Bank and IMF. So educational areas also, exchange programs also there. India and China signed education exchange program in 2006, which is an umbrella agreement for educational cooperation between the two countries. Under this agreement, government scholarships are awarded to 25 students by both sides. So trade cooperation also important here. Two countries have shown tremendous economic growth. Change in the dynamics of global economy has provided the opportunity to both countries to cooperate on wider scale. So bilateral trade has been expanded substantially in recent years, and nevertheless, the balance of trade still remains in China's favor. So So if you see the competition in foreign policy, China and India are still strategic rivals despite their increased economic cooperation. So, however, this alongside the US, Japan, Australia, India is also seen as one of the major actors that have an interest in offsetting China's dominance over India. So it seems that while an urge for closer cooperation, motivations, enhanced economic affairs between New Delhi and Beijing, competition is still what makes their bilateral relations and diplomatic relations. So India is having uh, good relations with its neighbors also. If you see, we are maintaining both friendly relations with India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So we have border conflicts are there, but we are maintaining peaceful, friendly relations. So if you see the Kargil and Kashmir issue with Pakistan is there, but we are maintaining in peaceful ways. But here, uh, India and Sri Lanka also got independence from the both the British rule about the same time. So we are also having good cooperation, bilateral relations from long ago. So and also in the initial years of its independence, both the countries signed uh, treaties between the even Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So India and Pakistan always had a hostile relationship. Both the countries confronted three wars and one conflict. So the first was the proxy war in Kashmir war during 1947. So, so you can read uh, easily about these um, relations between neighbors. So if you want the model papers or previous papers, just text to my number. I will send them in WhatsApp. I have already given the number in the chat box. So just to text to that number, I will forward the question papers. Okay, thank you for your participation. If you have any doubts, you can contact that number. Okay, thank you for your participation. Yes, today is the last class. We have been scheduled only for 6 classes only. Okay, I am concluding the session. Thank you for your participation.